G'day folks, it's Rob here and welcome to our small little backyard farm. Today's clip is going to be a ginger harvest clip. Every year I like to post a number of clips on how we harvest ginger, and at the end of this one I thought I'd give you a little bit of a quick growing guide just to set you guys off on the right path to grow some of your own ginger. We've already had some fairly decent harvest this season. This is a very nice plump bit of ginger we took out of a root pouch garden, so hopefully, fingers crossed, this one will be just as good. So we'll set the camera up, grab the garden fork, and I'll give you a bit of a gander at the yield. The two bits of ginger I used to plan out this bed were of different size. I just wanted to see what a smaller rhizome would produce when compared to a larger one of roughly round about double its size. So here's our little root pouch garden with two ginger rhizomes growing in it. We could possibly get them to grow all through winter here because we're having a very mild one, but I think I'd like to lift them out and process them so we can use them throughout the year. Just quickly, they're sharing the bed with a sweet pepper or a capsicum, which is flowering and setting fruit. That's how mild our winters are. And we've got some garlic down the front there. It's actually been knocked over because I had a whole load of volunteer Chinese amaranth growing in here. So hopefully they'll start to stand up. I just weeded them out yesterday so I could get to the ginger for this clip. So yeah, let's start digging. So to begin with, we'll lift this little plant here. This one didn't do as well as its sister, so it'll be interesting to see what we're going to get difference-wise between the two. Might just move this skink out of the way so I don't get him. So stick the fork down, just gently tilt it back. Try to get it out in one piece if I can. So there you go, not a massive piece of ginger. And you can see the little mother rhizome just there. But we'll hose them off and give you a bit of a better look once we're done with the other section. Now for rhizome number 2. Hope we don't disturb the roots of the sweet pepper too much. Just trying to get the fork right underneath it. I just have to be a little bit more careful with this one. Oh no, I think we got it all in one piece. So there we go. Not a bad looking bit of ginger at all, really. Let's break these stems off. But once again, you can't really see how good it is until you give it a hose off. So we'll grab the hose and give both sections a bit of a wash and I'll give you a closer look. So we'll start off with this little piece here. Give them a bit of a hose. So not a bad looking bit of ginger. And just to show you, this little section here is what's known as the mother, or the seed ginger that went down. And as you can see, it's a fairly small little section of ginger. And this section here, I broke off when I set it on the ground. So I'll give it a bit of a clean. So there's the yield from our second section of ginger. Not a bad little harvest at all. So I just wanted to point something out to you, but first I'm just going to clear away some of these roots and stems to give you a bit of a better look. These stems, by the way, have actually got a lot of ginger scent and flavour to them. It's not something I generally save myself, but I do know other people do save them. If you don't have such a fantastically huge yield, you can save some of this to use. They are very fibrous, so if you are going to use them, I would slice them very thin and probably use them in a herbal infusion, something along those lines. Just another thing I wanted to point out on this one, in ginger and turmeric, they both belong to the same family. You can quite often get these little bulbs on these larger roots that go down. I've seen a few people ask what they are online. There was a turmeric post recently on the Earth Gardener Facebook group. What these guys are is basically an energy store for the plant. So when the plant's doing well, it creates these little nodules, as I understand it, to store energy for later use in the growing season. So just something to keep in mind. They're nothing, you know, that's bad. They're not nematodes or anything like that. They're just a little energy store on the root itself. So let's continue chopping these off. Actually looks like some sort of weird Leviathan squid monster. So something I just wanted to show you when it comes to planting out ginger, it does pay to use these larger sections. You might be able to make out just in there where I accidentally snapped it off. This section here was growing from this point here, connected into there, and we have this section growing out of this side of the rhizome. Now this mother rhizome or seed rhizome is roughly around about 5 to 7.5 centimetres or 2 to 3 inches across. A nice big, you know, chunky bit of seed rhizome that went into the ground. So it's produced 2 growth points and given us a fair whack of ginger. This little bit here though is a small bit of ginger, just this little section here, and all it's gone on to produce is one growth point that's come out this side here. If I'd used a slightly larger bit, we may have ended up with double that yield, would have been more energy to go into the rhizome itself. So just something I thought I'd point out. Now I will weigh these guys up after I clean off this last little bit that broke off, and yeah, we'll see what sort of a yield we got from these pieces. So we've got our two sections of ginger here, but I'll just zoom in a bit so you can see the readout on the scales. So it's coming up at 1 gram. This thing's a little bit finicky. So we'll weigh up the first section. It comes in at 350 grams. So normally around about half what you'd expect from the backyard yield. But then again, as I said, I did grow it with a very small section of ginger. So I wasn't expecting a bumper harvest from this one. The second plant. Now this one did a little bit better. So we're looking at around about 1 kilo. So the average backyard harvest is, as I said, around about 800 grams. So just to make myself honest, we'll take off the mother section, and that brings us down to 964 grams for this plant. So I'm pretty chuffed with that. So this awesome looking little bit of ginger here, along with the rest of the harvest, is going to find its way up into the kitchen, where we'll process it so we can use it in meals throughout the year. I've recently uploaded a clip showing the different ways we like to preserve our gingers, and also a couple of suggestions on how you can store the root that you want to plant out next year, the seed ginger. So if you want to check it out, the little link's up there, and it'll also be in the description below. So now for a couple of tips so you can grow your own tasty ginger like this. Now, as I said before, I used this small rhizome and the larger one just to see what would happen. And yeah, the yield was quite obvious. This is the section of rhizome that was grown from the small one, and all these other bits up the back and down the side grew from this larger 2 to 3 inch or 5 to 7.5 centimeter section. So I'm actually going to be planting ginger back out into this bed once I feed it up with some nice organic fertilizer, and these are the two sections I'll be using. So ginger, this awesome tasting spice, is a native to the tropical areas of the Indian subcontinent, where it grows as an understory plant. So it does well in the shade as well as full sun. Now, I have done a growing guide in the past. It's got a bit of an index in the description. I'll link that up there for you folks who want a more in-depth look, or for you guys who live in a cooler region and want some tips on how you may be able to grow some of this in your cool climate. So when I'm looking for a piece of ginger to plant out, I'm wanting something that has a few different growth points on it. What that means is these will send off shoots, they'll grow above the soil, hit the sunlight, they'll start to photosynthesize, nice healthy soil blend, loads of nutrients, nice big rhizomes. So that's the theory anyway. So a couple of growth points I think is a good idea. When I plant them out, I like to dig a trench about 2 inches, 2 to 3 inches deep, or 5 to 7.5 centimeters, and I like to sit the ginger in it like this. As you saw when it was harvested, it tends to grow in this position. Also means these shoots can go straight up through the soil and hit the sunlight. Now, as for the soil blend, I grow primarily in containers at the moment, but normally when I grow in the ground, I like to dig through a nice, well broken down compost, a bit of a handful of the slow released organic fertilizer, you can use the one of your choice, and plant the ginger into that. For containers, I like to use a slightly looser mix, mainly so the containers have good drainage, the water can flow through. If you have a lot of water around the ginger root itself in the container, they can rot over time, so I like to keep it reasonably well draining. Another thing I like to do to get a decent yield is to come back around about halfway through the season and top dress with a nice broken down compost. Worm castings would also work fantastic if you have a worm farm at your disposal that you can harvest from. Through the season, I will also give them a bit of a liquid feed with a liquid fertilizer. I've used all sorts of things. I've used my own aged urine, I've used seaweed based ones, I've used fish emulsions. I think it just helps to make sure those nutrients are in the soil so you can get a nice decent sized rhizome. When it comes to harvesting, as you saw, I do think it's a good idea to get these guys out of the ground, hose them off, and then let them dry out a little bit. If you do store them in the fridge, please don't wrap them in paper towel or damp towel or even paper bags. Wait for the root section to dry off and then pop them in a Ziploc bag or an airtight container and pop them in the vegetable crisper section of your fridge, and the root section will last a lot longer. So really not a bad little harvest at all, and it does give a good demonstration on the size of seed rhizome you start out with. A smaller one, maybe not such a great yield, but if you add a nice sizable chunk, potentially you could end up with a very nice harvest indeed. Now for you folks in a cooler climate, or people who want to have a go at growing in containers, there's that clip I mentioned before. I've actually got it in a playlist along with a how to grow turmeric clip as well, and there's also some processing clips, because there's no point harvesting ginger and letting it shrivel up on the bench. Those clips will go through and show you how you can save your ginger and turmeric for use throughout the year. So I do hope you've enjoyed that little bit of a look at the harvest, and hopefully those quick pointers will help you folks out who want to crack at growing your own tasty ginger spice for yourself. I would like to quickly thank you all for coming along and checking out our Backyard Farm YouTube channel. Hope you, stick around and have a look at the aquaponic clips and whatnot. If you feel like it, you can also hit that subscribe button. So I will pretty much leave it there. I hope you have an absolutely fantastic weekend, and I will catch you next clip. Cheers all, have a top one.